Let's get right to some breaking news. An Olympic sprinter, Oscar Pistorius, just granted bail in South Africa. An audible yes from his supporters in court, his father reaching forward to touch his son's back, and the judge spoke for over 2 hours before ruling. ABC's Bazi Kanani is tracking all the very latest. Bazi, good morning.
Good morning, Amy. Oscar Pistorius just broke down in tears when the judge announced just moments ago that he has been granted bail, that he will be allowed to go home. His family shouted for joy. They stood up. They were huddled together and hugging each other for several minutes after the magistrate said today that this is not a matter of whether he is guilty, but at this time a matter of whether he has the right to have bail until he stands trial. The magistrate said that there were a couple of main factors he considered in his decision, and those are whether Pistorius is a flight risk and whether Pistorius is a danger to anyone else in the community if he's allowed to go free. The magistrate said that the prosecution was not able to prove that, and so at this moment, Oscar Pistorius is in the courtroom. He is listening now to the conditions of bail that have been set. A few of those conditions that have come down so far are that he will not be allowed to have guns, and that while he will be able to stay with family members, he will not be able to go back to his own home, the home where the shooting incident occurred with his girlfriend, although it's unlikely that he would choose to go back to that home at this point anyway. Oscar Pistorius is expected to post bail later today. He will have to pay more than $100,000, and then again he's expected to stay with family. George?
Okay, thanks, Bazi, for all those breaking details right now. Let's bring in GMA legal analyst Dan Abrams. Pretty extraordinary morning there in South Africa. The judge spoke, as Bazi said, for a couple of hours, finally granted the bail. But this was a pretty high standard to be met. There had to be exceptional reasons to grant this bail.
That's right. We had talked about whether the judge was going to still apply that very tough standard to the defense, basically saying you have to prove to us why you ought to be released. But then in the end, when the judge ruled, it seems that the ruling was simply based on the fact that he wasn't a flight risk and he wasn't going to be a danger to the community, which are kind of standard bail conditions. So it seems what the judge did is said, here's the tough legal standard, and then actually didn't apply that tough a legal standard. There had
been so much discussion among both the prosecution and the defense about Pistorius' disability and how that, and whether that meant he was a flight risk or not.
Yeah, and that didn't come up too much in the course of the judge's very, very long and belabored ruling. It seems very clear this judge wanted to cover his bases. He wanted to have responses to anyone who was going to criticize him. He talked about public outrage. He talked about all the arguments that the prosecution made here, gave validity to some of them, criticized others. So he
a little history lesson on bail in South Africa.
A long history lesson. Look, he knows that the world is watching, and as a result wanted to make sure that he had been very clear about understanding the legal standard, understanding the facts, and why he came to the ruling.
Now, we have to remember, this is just a bail hearing.
That's right.
This is not the trial. The trial could be several months away.
And the court made that point again and again. The judge kept saying, let's remember here, I'm not the trier of fact. I'm not the one who's going to determine whether this case has been proven beyond a reasonable doubt, etc. But this is a huge victory for Pistorius. Let's be clear. When you are charged with premeditated murder, you are generally held without bail. The fact that he is being released and for this 6-month, maybe 8-month, maybe 1 year period is a really big win for him, particularly if the defense is going to end up being this should be a much lesser crime, something like negligent homicide, where you're talking about a relatively short sentence.
And it seems like a sign that the prosecution's case was not as strong as it appeared in those first hours.
There's no question. I mean, the judge didn't want to say that, but that's the reality. The reality is the prosecution's case is not as strong as when this bail hearing started. And that's going to be a problem, not just for the bail hearing, but for when this case goes to trial.
Okay, Dan Abrams, thanks very much.